what is the business model?
So in English, we run ads. So an advertiser can come to Quora and they can pay to run an ad on a specific question or on a specific topic where they want to target people. So it looks similar to other self-service ad products.
I see. So you can see that Adam started with high school, and then college Facebook, and then joined Facebook, and then quit. So serial entrepreneur, and then right now he has started a company which we call Unicorn, which is a private company with over $1 billion market cap. And what is your goal? What do you want to achieve through Quora? How big or how far do you want to reach by using Quora?
I'd like to get to the point where everyone in the world is using Quora, and I think you've listed a lot of these different valuations, and I think people tend to fixate on those because it's the only concrete number you can get from the outside. But we're really focused on our mission. So the mission is share and grow the world's knowledge, and we think that there's just a very positive impact on society when there's more access to knowledge. And so we want to build a sustainable business, and making a lot of revenue and raising money is an important step in that. But really, we want to just greatly increase the amount of knowledge that's available in the world.
So what do you keep up late at night? What are your concerns now?
So Quora was, so when we started Quora, we really focused on quality. We focused on making sure that as Quora got bigger and bigger, the quality would stay high. And so the thing I kind of worry the most about and focus the most on is keeping the quality high as we get to more and more people using the product. So with 200 million people every month coming to Quora, there's a lot of pressure, right? So that attracts spammers to the system. It attracts otherwise people who might not actually be interested in helping other people and truly sharing knowledge. They just have something that they can gain by sharing something, and so it takes a lot of work to sort of stay on top of the quality control as we have a greater and greater user base.
I see. I'm a venture capitalist myself, and at the same time, an entrepreneur. And I'm quite curious about what kind of value added you get from venture capital.
So maybe I can just talk about our Series A investor, Benchmark Capital. So they invested in 2010, and Matt Kohler is our partner from there, who's on our board. And we've gotten an incredible amount, I think, from them over the last 8 years. We've gotten so the first thing I'd say is just having raised money from a highly reputable investor, even independent of any work they do, just having that stamp of approval is very important to things like recruiting certain employees. Employees, especially when a company is new, employees can't always tell for themselves how successful it's going to be later, and so they look to these external signals of credibility. Especially maybe employees have parents who are conservative, and the employee themselves might want to join, but they they need to get their parents bought into the decision, and so having this reputable firm there, that adds a lot of value just by itself. Then on top of that, we just get a ton of advice. They refer employees to us. They, reference checks. If we're hiring someone new, we can ask through their network, if the person worked at another benchmark company. They've been very helpful with later rounds of fundraising. So in our later fundraising rounds, they can connect us with investors. They can vouch for us to investors. And yeah, so those are some specific examples, but really there's just a ton that we've gotten from them.
Okay, very good. Well, let me go to the questions I picked up from Quora the day before yesterday and yesterday. Why do you think that a Q&A is the best method in collecting and sharing knowledge?
Yeah, so this is a good question.
This is a question by Itaru Hamamoto.
This is a good question. You can think of a question as a request for knowledge. It's kind of like an interface between one person who wants knowledge and another person who has knowledge. And the question is an expression of what someone wants to know. And what a question allows is it allows someone who has a lot of knowledge in their head. There's a lot of different things that they could share. It helps them focus on one particular thing. And it helps them, and it gives them a sort of motivation. We can collect 200 people who are all interested in the same question, and then we can go to someone who is an expert, and we can say, hey, 200 people want to know the answer to this. And that's a lot easier for an expert than if they had to just write a blog post out of nowhere. People run into like writer's block. They kind of maybe sometimes look presumptuous if they're writing about something that it's not clear that a lot of people want to know about. And so the question serves as basically this request for knowledge, and that's been very important for us over time.
The next question is from Kensuke Inoue. What do you think is the advanced format of knowledge sharing beyond Q&A?
Beyond Q&A, I think Wikipedia is a really valuable resource for the world, and it's it's not always perfect and it has limits, but it's very useful to a lot of people. So if I was going to say besides Q&A, I'd probably say that format.
And the same question, the question from the same person, Kensuke Inoue. Do you think that AI can answer the questions in the future?
Yeah, so this is a good question. I think that's a long way away. A lot of the time, when a human is answering a question, it's not just that they need to be smart to be able to write the answer, it's that they need to have specific experience in the world that they're drawing on. And the AI is not usually going to have access to the information that's in everyone's heads out there. But to the extent that it's possible, we want to support that. So you could imagine a future where there are answers on Quora from AI, maybe AI that Quora creates, but also maybe AI that other companies create. And so we can aggregate that knowledge. But I think this is a long way away. I'm much more optimistic about AI being used for helping to route questions to the right people, and AI and humans working together, than I am about like AI just doing the whole thing itself.
Mm-hmm. The same question from the same person, Kensuke Inoue. Do you prohibit or discourage emoji? It says he said why is that?
So in our questions, we are pretty strict about canonicalizing questions. Okay. So we want to make sure there's only one version of each question on Quora. Okay. That's how we can rally 200 people onto the same question, because we don't spread everyone's energy over 100 different versions of the same question. And so as part of that, we have a pretty strict policy on we'll merge questions together if they're the same, and we don't want unnecessary formatting in questions. So that may be what they're talking about, and that's the answer.
I see. Now, this is a question from Sakura Suzuki. Are the types of questions different depending on country or language? Like in case of Instagram, they say that in Japan there are more photos of pets, like dogs and cats, than any other countries. And at the same time, Japanese people like to put up the photos of foods, like that kind of tendency we have. What about in case of Q&A? Do you have any, is it different depending upon like Germany or UK or the US or Japan or Italy? Or are there any differences in types of questions that people raise?
Yeah, there's lots of differences. And so one of the differences is that, in Italian, there's just a lot of questions about Italy and local events in Italy, right? And so one of the top topics in Japanese Quora is Japan, and that's it's natural, it makes sense, but it's maybe not totally obvious if I hadn't told you that. There's some countries, if there's like a political election happening, there will be questions about whatever's going on. If there's current events, some current events are more relevant in some countries than others. I think in Japan so far, we've done well with questions about the technology industry and startups and programming. But we'll see. That may just be, I think a lot of our early traction in the US as well was in technology industry and programming and startups.
Question from Satoshi Suzuki. When every knowledge can become searchable and it can be storable in the outside memory, what kind of people will become more intellectual? Do you think the definition of intellectual person changed depending upon the technological advancement?
I don't know if I don't know if there's ever going to be a state where all knowledge is searchable and accumulated. I think there's always new knowledge being formed every day as people have experiences out in the world, and so I don't really expect a state where everything will be in computers and searchable. I think being intellectual as intellectual as an adjective that means more than just being able to search through knowledge. I think it means that you really like knowledge, and so I think that's probably something that that will continue.
Okay, let me go on to the questions from the floor, and you can see that there has been 14 votes for this particular question. It is, what are some of the best AI-related books that you recommend to technology-focused people from non-tech background as well?
People from what kind
of background? It's technology. What kind of books do you recommend for technology-focused person? B is for non-technology background.
That's really hard. I think the AI is moving so fast that I don't get a lot of my information about AI from books. Usually books are many years out of date. So for a non-tech person, I don't have a great sense of what's what books to read. I would maybe just say if you want to learn about AI, I think the way to go is to try actually building something. If you know how to program, you can just dabble in it. Just a little bit of experimentation, I think, would go a long way in kind of building your intuition about what's possible. So I don't know about books.
So you don't have any recommendation of books?
Not on AI.
Not on AI, because the AI itself is so much changing and advancing so rapidly, and the books are not catching up with it. So who do you respect a lot? Who do you think we should follow to know about what the status of AI, how it's advancing? Or who do you respect the most in terms of AI experts?
Let's see. I recently joined the board of OpenAI, which is an AI research lab, and so that's an institution that you can follow. You can follow all the publications that they're putting out. It may be hard to follow if you don't have too much of a technical background, but I think some of it is relatively accessible. So that's something they have a Twitter account that you could follow.
Okay, so 10 votes. What's that? 8 votes. What was the hardest thing you ever had to do through Quora's business growth?
Let's see. So we had a period where we grew really quickly, and so this was in the beginning of 2011. There was this huge spike in our usage, and there was kind of a series of events where we got a bunch of press, and then we got endorsed by some famous people on Twitter, and then we got to be a trending topic on Twitter, and then we have these digest emails, and that we fixed some problems in those, and those kind of reactivated a lot of existing users, and And so there was a spiral of greatly increasing usage over the course of a week. And so everyone, this was before everyone was back from holiday break. So we all basically had to just stop what we were doing over the holidays and just focus on making the system scale. And we were able to keep things running, but it resulted in the quality, I think, going way down, as our systems at the time were just not ready to cope with this increase in scale. And so we had just a ton of this huge backlogs of manual work that needed to be done to manage the quality. And so it took months, really, I think, to like dig ourselves out of that. But it was a really tough time for everyone at the company from the beginning of 2011 until probably maybe June 2011. And so I think in retrospect, we wish that we had set things up to be more scalable and ready for more growth. But then I also think in retrospect that if you spend too much time planning for the future, you don't know what's going to happen, and so it's really hard to know how much to plan ahead versus just react.
Okay, I think this is the question you have been asked quite a few times in Japan. Considering that Japanese are already familiar with Yahoo's Chiebukuro for years, what is your strategy to penetrate Japanese market?
So I don't know. I've looked at some of the competition in Japan, but I know the U.S. market a lot better. So let me just describe that because I think the analogy is pretty relevant. So before Quora launched in English, there were a lot of other Q&A products and other forums, other places where people would share knowledge, and we noticed that the ones that were small could maintain high quality, but anyone that got really big would always end up very low quality. My understanding is that that's also the case in the Japanese market. And I think it's been true in other markets outside the US as well. So our goal is to just focus on quality. We focus on quality using artificial intelligence and also a lot of other ways we've designed the system. And so we expect that by focusing on high quality, we're providing a product that's pretty differentiated from what's out there. And that's what we've seen so far. It seems to be working. We keep growing. We keep getting more users. They write more answers. With more answers, it gets more useful for everyone. And it seems like all the competition and other places where people are sharing knowledge are not doing well enough at serving this core need that people have in order to sort of stop us from growing.
There has been already 55 questions to you. 55 questions to you already. But I'll be quick in asking some questions. It says what are Quora's plan for fake news filter, and how will it avoid bias, especially as it wants to be knowledge-based business system?
So these are really important concerns. For fake news, we don't really focus so much on news. I think there's a whole news industry and other products that are made for distributing news. We focus on answers to questions, which tend to be more evergreen. They tend to be valuable for many years once someone writes an answer. And the fact that we're focused on this evergreen content, I think, makes some of these problems a little bit easier. We have one of the challenges with fake news is that the news moves so fast that there isn't time for it to get reviewed before it gets distributed. And so in our case, we have answers are going to live on for many years, and so we have more of a chance to adapt and react if there's a bad answer. And then in terms of fairness and bias, we want to make sure that we have lots of users with all different kinds of perspectives using Quora. And then we want to make sure that our algorithms aren't biased as well. And so we have a few different things we do to sort of look at when there are problems like that cropping up. And we're not perfect, but we just kind of do our best to try to make sure we always can, we don't have a system that's kind of going to bias against people with a particular viewpoint.
Is your AI model in English and Japanese same or not?
we have, in general, we try to build one model that works across all languages. The model has features in it so that it'll know what language it is, and so it can learn things, like it can learn that people in a certain language have different preferences than people in other languages.
Okay. So you spoke about singularity. So what do you think will take AI from the current state of ANI, artificial narrow intelligence, to AGI, artificial general intelligence?
I mean, that's a huge question. That's what I think most AI researchers are thinking about. I can't say what's going to be the one thing, but I think computing power is still a major limiting factor. And so as computer hardware gets faster and faster, and we can train larger and larger models and train on more and more data, then I think that's what's gonna, that may not be all we need, but I think that's one kind of prerequisite before we get to more general algorithms that really work as well as these more narrow algorithms.
Any future for Quora to use the blockchain technology?
So, the blockchain is, I think blockchain gets a lot of hype, and it's not always clear exactly what it means. Quora is a centralized product, and we really believe in centralization. Like a lot of the value in Quora is that we can use machine learning to match people with the right other people to share knowledge. And blockchains usually make sense in a distributed, decentralized world. And so they're kind of a different approach to things. Usually when you're doing AI and machine learning, you want everything centralized, and these blockchain applications are for cases where there's no centralization at all, or you're trying to evade some central authority. So I'd say in general, no. There may be interesting things we could do with the technology. Right now, there's just a lot of, I think, uncertainty around how the whole technology and also the legal treatment is going to be for cryptocurrencies. So depending on how all this stuff works out in the future, we may. There are some blockchain products that try to enable knowledge sharing and compensate users for sharing their knowledge, but none of them have been very successful. And so if some of them were more successful, then we might see that as an indicator that there is a lot of potential there.
What is the incentives for experts to write answer?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So why do people like writing answers? Different people are motivated by different things. So I'll just try to list some different motivations that different people have. Some people just intrinsically enjoy writing. The same reason why someone might write a diary, or they might write an email to their friend, or they might write a blog post. Other people, they really want to help people. So they feel good helping someone, the same reason they might be motivated to work in a job where they're helping people, same reason they might work for a nonprofit. And Quora provides a very efficient way to help a lot of people. So for a lot of people who, if your motivation is to want to help other people and there's some subject that you know a lot about, answering questions on Quora is a very efficient way to help large numbers of people. Whereas if you're helping people one-on-one, that's not a very efficient process. Whereas on Quora, you can help 100,000 people. So those are some of the motivations. Other people benefit because they can build a reputation. So we have lots of people who have gotten jobs because of answers they've written on Quora. There's a venture capitalist, Jason Lemkin, who has publicly credited Quora as building up his reputation to the point where he's able to raise a big venture capital fund because of the answers he wrote on Quora that established this reputation and put him in the position to be able to do that. And yeah, other people are motivated by they feel like they've learned a lot in their life, and they want to give back to society. And it's not necessarily about helping a specific person, but they want to sort of repay society. So we actually have, we see this motivation, especially in some like retired people who feel like the core is a good way to share with future generations. But our stance as a platform is that different people have different motivations, and we want to sort of enable and support all of them.
Okay, Adam, I have 61 questions for you. Instead of I selecting questions, why don't you go ahead and try to pick whatever questions you feel like answering. And then the one that has this one is I already asked. Which one do you think yeah, you can answer any kind of questions you feel like answering.
So
I think this is better.
The question is how come we decided to add Japanese?
Okay.
And I'm going to interpret this as why did we prioritize Japanese? So our mission is to share and grow the world's knowledge, but most of the people in the world don't speak English. And so it's very important for our mission to be able to expand to other languages. Because we were so focused on quality, and keeping the quality high in English was very challenging, we didn't internationalize at all until we were about 6 years into building Quora. In order to fulfill our mission, we got to the point where we were confident enough in the quality in English, and we felt like we're ready to take on some more challenges, and so we internationalized. The reason we prioritize Japanese is that, let's see, so there's a few things. Number one, Japan is just a big market. There's a lot of people in Japan. I think it's a very deep culture, and there's a lot of knowledge that has been, I think, accumulated here and through hundreds of years. And I think being able to get that knowledge into the world is a valuable thing. And then we think there should be a particular fit between our product and Japan. So I've really enjoyed coming to Japan just as a tourist personally. I've been here I think over 10 times, and one of the things I've noticed, and I'm not an expert on the culture, but it seems that people here particularly value quality. Like there's a real focus on quality, and our product focuses on quality, and so we think that there should be a good fit between Quora and the Japanese market. But we're really gonna we're gonna learn and adapt. We don't think we're gonna get everything perfect right away, but we do think that there should be a particular compatibility here.
Adam came to Japan 10 times. Out of 8 times he came as a tourist. He came only twice as a business person. And then this Japanese version was launched only in November last year, and I was quite amazed that there's no office in Japan yet. And so some of you may become the employee of a Japan office to start up a Quora Japan. And for those of you who speak Japanese and who read Japanese, I encourage you to download Quora apps and then write questions or contribute by answering the questions. So what's your next topics that you like to go for? This is interesting because I'm curious as to what kind of question Adam would pick.
Okay, so there's a question that's basically what makes us different from Reddit and Stack Overflow. And so relative to Reddit, Quora is focused on questions and answers. Yeah. And Reddit is more of like a forum, and it focuses just on recent content. So Quora focuses on building up this big database of knowledge, and Reddit focuses on just kind of like community interactions. Reddit is very decentralized, so Reddit is organized into these subreddits, which can lead to great communities in the subreddits, but it can be kind of disorganized, and there's a lot of redundancy, and it's very difficult to find the right subreddit. Whereas Quora is just a flat space, so it's more like Wikipedia. Reddit is all pseudonyms.
Reddit is what?
Pseudonyms. So people don't use their real names on Reddit. And Quora is everyone has to use their real names. So it's just a lot of different kind of subtle choices I think you end up with a just totally different product at the end. Stack Overflow, relative to Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow is also vertically oriented. Stack Overflow focuses on programming Q&A. And it's really good for programming Q&A. There's a lot of features that are specialized for that. Quora is a horizontal platform. So we don't focus on any particular topic, and we intentionally only invest in features and work that's gonna benefit sharing knowledge about any topic.
Interesting. Okay, what's your next? This is it. The first question that he picked was about why he came to Japan, why did he launch Japanese market. Second is about differentiation compared to other competitors.
So the question is that I said that we evaluate the quality of an answer through AI and voting, but this question says people who vote are probably not experts. So we actually specifically try to direct a new answer toward experts to see what they think of it. And not everyone's vote kind of counts equally. So a vote from an expert will pay a lot more attention to that than a vote from someone else. And so it's almost like, you can almost think about how like academic peer review works. If you're gonna publish an article in an academic journal, you'll submit it and the editor will send it out to some other experts who they trust to see what they think about it as a way to sort of gauge whether it's worth publishing. And so we focus, anyone can vote on any answer, but the votes we pay the most attention to are votes from other people who actually are experts.
So what you mean is that even though you get 10 votes, and out of 9 maybe non-expert, 1 vote by expert is more appreciated. And do you quantify that? How do you weight the differences?
Yeah, there are degrees, and there's a lot of different, it's this machine learning algorithm, so it's hard to tell you exact rules for what it does, but it is, it will look at, for example, if someone has a PhD in a field, then that's a signal that maybe their vote should count more. Or if historically their votes have lined up with answers that we know are good, then that's a signal that they have better judgment as someone who's voting.
Very interesting. Do you have any other questions that you feel like answering, or if you don't, we can ask other questions? So there are quite a few coming up. And then it's quite interesting the way that it's being voted.
Okay, do I think Quora AI can replace universities or MBA schools as a physical place to share knowledge?
Okay, that's a good one.
So I don't, and we actually think of the like education space as a different market from what we're doing. So, and this applies. There may be online education products that could potentially threaten an MBA program in the future, but it won't be Quora. So some of the characteristics of what you need for education, one is that there's a motivation aspect.
Okay.
So Quora relies on people just wanting to spend their time reading answers just naturally. Often with education, it's going to be hard. You're going to have to really focus, and you need a stronger level of motivation than just you're just randomly checking something. And so often education products or schools will have a commitment aspect where you say you have to pay this whole tuition up front, and so now you've committed, and you're going to lose that if you don't actually study, or you're going to get bad grades, or you're going to get a degree at the end, and you only get it at the end if you complete all the courses. And so we don't have any kind of systems like that. If we added those, it would complicate things in a way that we don't want, and we would have to. There's a lot more to education than just this commitment mechanism, but that's an example of something that makes that market a different market than this kind of sharing knowledge on the internet.
Interesting. In case of education, it has an aspect of meeting friends, like you met Mark Zuckerberg. And do you add any kind of community aspect onto Quora so that people can meet each other through Quora?
People make friends on Quora. There's a lot of people who I meet who say that they met a co-founder of a business, or they've recruited employees, or They've made friends on Quora. So there is some of that. I think it's hard to compete with like real world socializing, which is what you can get in a physical school. But there is a social aspect of Quora as well.
Do you have like a meetups quite often? Like, do you have like a actual physical,
Yeah. We, in English we're so big that it's just kind of unwieldy to manage. So we'll have meetups for the top contributors to Quora in English, which is a very exclusive event. It's very hard to get to that level. But in other markets outside of English, we have more frequent meetups, and we rely a little bit more on that.
in case of like all the web services and apps, they think about stickiness, and like they want you to come back, they want the users to come back. What kind of stickiness do you have on Quora? Why do users keep coming back?
So we have a lot of stickiness. I think especially for a knowledge sharing product, I think we end up being a lot more sticky than the other knowledge products. So a lot of it comes down to personalization. So we're very good at showing people answers that are relevant to them, that they're going to find interesting. And that is through machine learning. But people feel like when they come to Quora, we often show them something that helps them out in some way or is interesting. And so I think, there are some studies about like why do people read the news? And a lot of it doesn't actually have much to do with the fact that it's about current events. It's like they want some kind of intellectual stimulation. They want to learn something new. They want to, like if you look at the articles in a typical newspaper, there's actually often a lot of articles that are not related to the breaking news. And so I think the same kind of motivation that causes people to want to read the news also leads a lot of people to just kind of check Quora regularly.
Check Quora, because what happens, people will come to Quora and ask about what's going on, and then people like learn.
But also people just check Quora because it might be like maybe someone's really interested in cooking and then there's new answers to read about new recipes or new cooking answers. For those people, sometimes that's more engaging than reading about what's going on with some war in somewhere across the world. So news is not the only motivation that people have.
While you search, let me ask you more questions. Like,
Sure.
How long do you work every day, and what do you do, besides work?
So let's see. So I work. I'd say I work pretty hard, but I think I try to keep it at a sustainable pace. So I think I'll go into the office usually around 9 or 10, and then
9 or 10. Okay.
and then I will stay until 6 or 7.
6 or 7.
And then I will also do work at home after, and then I'll go eat dinner usually, and then I'll do work at home for maybe it all depends on how much I have, but maybe another few hours.
Okay.
Maybe not if I'm tired. I think over the course of a week, I'm working like 60, 65 hours a week. Which I think of as like I'm working hard, but not like killing myself. And so that's my. I usually try to say on the weekend I'll try to have like one day where I don't do work.
Okay. So what do you do on the weekend?
I like reading.
Reading.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like I really like just using the internet. Just as a user. That's why I like building internet products, is I like using them too, right? So but not just
internet.
not just Quora.
What do you do using internet?
Like I like Twitter, for example.
Twitter, okay.
Yeah. In Silicon Valley, there's a news product called TechMeme,
Okay.
which has it's basically like a news digest, and I find that's a very good way to keep up with the technology trends. I do angel investing.
Okay, you do. Okay.
Yeah, I like that. That's another way that I just sort of learn a lot about what's going on in the industry outside of Quora.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where you keep up with how the trend is going on and also advancement of technology. So you sit on the board of an AI company and you do some angel investment. And what else do you do? Like, do you use, what else do you do to keep up with technology and AI, or do you still program, or do you, what do you do?
I don't program. I program occasionally. I will want to see if something's possible or test something out. But not. I don't like program like serious projects. I on Twitter I follow a lot of machine learning researchers, and so I will like read new papers when they come out. Sometimes I'll like look through different machine learning courses. And what else? I think the other thing is I hang out with a lot of other CEOs, other people in Silicon Valley, and that I think is just very stimulating, and get a lot of information from that. That's one of the great things about Silicon Valley is just like everyone is right there, and there's this whole social scene.
So what do you do like when you hang out? Like, do you drink or do you eat?
We eat often have dinner.
Dinner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a lot of drinking. People have parties. Someone have like a housewarming party and invite people over, and maybe drink a little, but it's mostly about socializing.
Okay, so let's ask like you can pick 2 or 3 more questions, and then we can finish. This is interesting. Like instead of asking questions directly from the floor, I think it's good to be selecting questions that you feel like answering.
So there's a question. What is your motivation for what you're doing right now? So for me, I think there's a lot of different motivations that come together for Quora. So when I was in college, as I mentioned before, I made some internet products, and that was something I just did when I had time, and I just intrinsically enjoyed the work involved in making a product like this. I think it's just an interesting challenge to create and run a system like this. I really like working with other good people, and I learn a lot from the other people that I work with, and so a lot of my motivation is about working with other good people, and part of what you get out of doing a startup is that it's a chance to work with other good people, and then I also care about my like impact on the world. So I feel like I've learned a lot in my life, and I've benefited from the all the technology that society has built up, and all the education institutions that exist in the world, and I feel like I have some responsibility to contribute back to society in some way, and so I think Quora is a way to do that, and I think it's particularly leveraged because Quora allows other people to help society by sharing their knowledge, but by focusing on creating Quora itself, that can have a much bigger impact than if I just like wrote a book myself or something like that.
Interesting.
Who owns the copyright of the answers on Quora? The person who writes the answer retains the copyright. They grant us a license to show the answer to other people, but we don't take the copyright.
Okay.
Would Quora be useful for counseling or coaching functionalities? I think what the question means is like, would we have a feature where you can talk to another user instead of just asking a question and then a one-shot answer? Could we let you like get advice, like a back and forth dialogue, maybe with someone who would write an answer? And the answer is no. So we think the market definition is really around answers that are going to help a large number of people, or at least multiple people. If you're building a product for one person to help a single other person, then you want a totally different kind of product. Usually those products involve the person who needs help having to pay money, to get the service. So there are some of these like consulting products, like in the US, there's this thing called Gerson Lerman Group, where like hedge fund investors who want to talk to people who are familiar with a company's products can use this network to get in touch with experts, and then have a phone call with them. We think that's just a different market. The market Quora's in is sharing knowledge in public so that it can benefit a lot of people, and not just a single person. So it ends up being a different market. I think an interesting thing I've learned is that Q&A, or this like expert, like network connections between experts and non-experts, ends up being a very vaguely defined market. And in practice, there are these totally different companies that are in the space that are not even, I wouldn't even think of them as competitive at all. It turns out that from the outside, it looks like everything is Q&A, or there's a lot of similarities, but they don't actually fit together.
Wow, there's lots of questions still. Okay, I will ask one or two questions and then we'd like to close. This is it. How would your life be different if you'd never met Mark Zuckerberg? This is from Vidian.
So I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't have joined Facebook as early. I think I'm sure I would have ended up in Silicon Valley otherwise. I probably would have started a company. I got a lot of valuable experience at Facebook that really helped me, and I think that I still would have been interested in social networking. I probably would have gotten into social networking. So I wouldn't have had as much experience. I probably wouldn't have made. I would have made some decisions worse at Quora if I started Quora. I might have started a different social networking company. Who knows? I don't know. It's really hard to say.
Okay, this is a question. What would you recommend to do to improve programming skills?
So I think I would say, so it depends on how much time you have to invest. So one thing you can do is just take courses, and I think that's useful. If courses are a good, if you like courses and you learn well from courses, then that's a good way to learn to program. If you're not as motivated by like the academic structure, then I think just doing projects and making something that you like. So like if you like games, then make some simple games for yourself. If you like internet products, then try making a just very simple internet product. I think playing around and running, like doing little experiments is very important to learning, and don't try to like make one massive project. Just do a series of like 10 small projects. And then I guess I'd also say if programming contests appeal to you, then that's like a really efficient way to accelerate your learning.
Okay, the last question. How do you attract, select, and hire talents?
So this is I could talk for a long time about this. So Silicon Valley is an extremely competitive environment for talent, and so it's very important to differentiate relative to other employers, and so at different stages in our history as a company, we've differentiated in different ways. So when we first started out, the differentiation, a lot of it was around scale. So the fact that someone would join a small company was a lot different. So we recruited people who were working at Google, for example, and they felt like, they're going to have a lot more impact at Quora, and they're going to be a lot closer to the actual decisions that are getting made than they would be at Google. As we've gotten bigger, we've focused a lot on our mission. So a lot of people feel like Quora is something that benefits the world, and maybe they like Quora themselves. And so through the mission and through the product, that differentiation helps us a lot. And then I guess I'd say another thing is as you start to build a strong culture and you have some really good employees, then that starts to be people who other people can learn from, and people get drawn to the company because they know about the reputation of it, or they come and interview. We have at certain times we've had a reputation of having the hardest technical interviews out of any of the companies in our category that we're competing with. And so people want to come interview at Quora just because they feel proud of being able to get an offer from us or work at a high-performing team. And then there's all the standard stuff too that every company does. So, we have a recruiting team. We are constantly reaching out to people. For retention of employees, we make sure we have good managers, make sure we're making good decisions. We run engagement surveys to sort of help get data on what we could do better from all around the company. We spend a lot of time just talking to employees, understanding what's motivating to them. Developing good leaders is really important. We're constantly trying to do better, and I think Silicon Valley is competitive in. It can be challenging that it's competitive because you employees all have, anyone who's working at Quora has lots of options for other places. They could easily go get a job that would pay just as well, and so that presents a challenge. But it's forced us to get to be, I think, very good at people management. I think relative to other companies our size, we've had no choice to get good at that and to build a strong culture and have a strong mission.
Great, Adam. Thank you very much for coming. We have learned a lot from high school. I have asked you lots of personal questions as well. High school and then college, and then at the same time, Facebook and Quora startups, and then future AI and leadership, and also about motivation and so forth. And so I hope you keep coming back to Japan. We will be hosting a G1 Global Conference in October, so I'll give you a good reason to come back to Tokyo in October. I hope you can come. I'll come to also Silicon Valley to see you. And I'm also like to thank all the audience here for giving us very good questions, and it was very helpful. And I hope this session for 2 hours has been quite fruitful for all of you. So thank you very much, and thanks, Adam, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the engaging dialogue and so many questions from the audience.